Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, all, and thank you for attending tonight's meeting. We appreciate your attendance and look forward to your presentation. As I said previously, this will be my last chaired meeting, and then going forward, other people will take over. Daisy, are you taking notes, or can I assign somebody else? Okay, thank you. She's so dependent. Okay, let's go to the minutes, please. Chris?
I'm sorry, what happened?
Bring up the agenda.
You want me to bring it up?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me try. Okay, agenda. Bear with me, gentlemen, just 1 second. The agenda for tonight. You guys can see it, right? You can see what I'm doing.
Oh, we don't see the agenda yet.
Okay. And the agenda for tonight is review
Okay.
of January and February, both of them, 2021 meeting minutes.
Okay, this is for the committee. We have any questions in reference to the minutes for both meetings? Okay, motion to accept the minutes. Anybody second it?
I second it.
Okay, Debbie seconds it. Any discussion? Okay, motion approved. Okay, let's go to your presentation, gentlemen.
All right, thank you very much, Frano, and good evening, everybody. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Navardo Lopez. I'm the Bronx Borough Commissioner for New York City DOT. I'm joined here by several of my colleagues, Keith Kalb, Deputy Borough Commissioner, Matthew Orancio, Director of Bronx Director of Community Affairs and Planning, Holly Malone, Community Coordinator, and then from our Bikes and Greenways unit, Sean Macias, Deputy Director, Nick Carey, Senior Project Manager, Zach White, Project Manager. Oh, and also another member of the Bronx team, Teresa Cruz, Borough Planner. So we're here tonight to sort of
Hey, Holly Malone is here also.
Yeah, I introduced her, Keith.
Oh, sorry.
We're here tonight as a follow-up from a presentation that we gave this community board. I believe it was back in 2019, or was it 2018? It was quite some time ago. We had come to the community board to inform you that we were beginning the process to study Bronxdale Avenue. We had, over the years, received complaints about speeding, so we wanted to take a very broad and thorough look at the corridor. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we did not come to you last year with this presentation, with this proposal, so we're a bit behind our schedule, so we apologize for the delay. But we're basically going to show you a redesign of this entire corridor from Bronx Park East all the way to Castle Hill Avenue. So with that, I'm going to turn over the mic to Zach, who's the project manager for this proposal. He's going to go over this. I want to stress that this is our sort of first of many discussions and meetings that we want to have with the community board and the surrounding community. So this is our first draft of this. And I would ask that everyone hold their questions until after the presentation, and then we could easily go back and answer any questions that you have on any of the slides. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach.
Okay, thank you, Navardo. Let me share my screen, I guess. Okay, you can see the slides changing?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so yes, thanks, Navarro. So I'm going to go over the proposed safety improvements for Bronxdale Avenue. Um, I want to point out the cover photo here, which is a woman walking around Neal Avenue, Hunt Avenue along Bronxdale, right under the train. It's a really uncomfortable place to walk, and I think, and we're going to talk about it later in the presentation, but I just wanted to, we picked it for the cover to really put you right in the space of where we're talking about, and we'll come back to it. So, as Navarro just said, I have the closer to exact date here. June 2018 was when we presented our first ideas about issues on Bronxdale Avenue, and we requested feedback about the atypical intersections there. In February 2020, DOT also proposed the improvements that are over on Bronx Park East and White Plains Road and Unionport Road, the big parking lot there. And that was installed in fall of 2020. My understanding is there's still things going on with it, but generally it was installed. And part of that installation is the protected bike lane that is raised with the asphalt right here, the yellow line running through it. So that's something we wanted to think about when we're thinking about future improvements along Bronxdale Avenue. So one of the things we did in September of 2018 was the New York City DOT street ambassadors visited 2 locations along Bronxdale Avenue. And we talked to people along the street to hear what their thoughts were about the street, where they go, what their concerns were. The major concerns from people were vehicles failing to yield and speeding vehicles. So that's what we did on the local level. And since then, on the more citywide level, the city has put out what's called the Green Wave Plan, which is a plan to for cycling in New York City, and it's looking at all the fatalities and the injuries that have happened to cyclists over the past couple years. And one of the big things that came out of this plan is to install 30 miles of protected bicycle lanes every year in the city, which is a lot. So it means we're looking to install newer designs. We're looking to do more rigorous planning and implementation. And so that means we're going all over the city to install protected bike lanes. Another part of that is the education outreach, which we've put out new safety cards, but it's not just for how to bike safer, but it's also how to look out for people on bikes safer and how to just be safer on the streets that we're all using in various modes. So part of the protected bicycle lanes is that we've done a fair amount of research around them. So our study has shown that even though it's called a protected bicycle lane, and you might think immediately that we're going to just add bike lanes, it actually decreases the injuries, the crashes with injuries for everyone on the street, and especially pedestrians, because we're not just going in and putting in a bike lane. We end up reducing the road width. We end up adding turn lanes. We end up adding pedestrian islands and all sorts of improvements to the street that in general make it safer for everyone, especially pedestrians. So now I'm going to go into the real proposal here. So I'm going to talk about the existing conditions along Bronxdale Avenue, and then I'll go into the proposed corridor conditions for the whole length of the street. And then I'll talk about very specific detailed intersection designs that we have come up with. I want to point out this is another image right under the train around Neal and Hunt and Bronxdale. Someone on a bicycle kind of squeezing by underneath the elevated structure. So for the existing conditions, there have been 179 injuries on Bronxdale Avenue between 2014 and 2018. It's a excessively wide roadway, and there's a lot of complicated intersections that make it hard to cross, and there's even places where there's no markings for you to cross there, but you might want to cross there. I also want to point out that there was a fatality on Bronxville Avenue. Person was hit by a car while they were walking. And so that's something we really want to take into account when we're thinking about how to improve the safety of a street. So here's an image of Bronxville Avenue. It's 60 feet wide with 2 lanes in each direction, parking on each side of the street. If someone wants to ride a bike, they'll be riding in between the parked cars and the moving car in an unmarked space, just sort of in the travel lane. And so what does a street like this have issues with? So first off, Bronxville Avenue has pretty low vehicle volumes, resulting in speeding. There's also undefined lane assignments, pedestrian access issues, and a lack of neighborhood bicycle-friendly connections to Bronx Park. I'm going to go into detail over these few points here in the next slides. So for the relatively low vehicle volumes, we did a traffic study along Bronxville Avenue, and you can see some of the counts on the screen. It ranges from 600 at one end going in one direction to about 350 vehicles going in the other direction at other points along the corridor. And this is during the peak hour. So this is when in our counts, when this was the most people that were on the street. And this is pretty low for a street that has 2 lanes in each direction. So this sort of encourages speeding. For everyone that drives, if it's kind of empty, you might go a little faster, put your foot on the pedal a little heavier. There's no one around. And when we did a speed test, we found that 84% of the vehicles were traveling above the speed limit, and 46% of those were traveling 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. So even more than just slightly over the speed limit. So for the undefined lane assignments, this goes into some of the markings on Bronxville Avenue. So there's 2 lanes in each direction, but they're not marked for turns or anything like that. So people are just driving forward in whatever lane they want. But when you want to make a left turn, you're going to end up pulling over to left turn, the leftmost lane, and then slowing down. And while you're doing that, what happens is people behind you give you what we call back pressure. So these cars are coming up behind and they might honk or just stare at you in your rearview mirror, and it pressures you to want to go forward quicker. So you might not see the pedestrian crossing here. You might not see the car coming here. And this sort of creates a situation that could get more dangerous and cause a crash. And the other thing that happens is while someone's coming up behind you, they might want to change the lane next to them, which also is a situation where you're going into another lane and it could cause a crash while you're trying to switch lanes at the last second. So this is something we wanted to look at while we're redesigning a street and try to fix this. Okay, so then there's the pedestrian access issues. So Bronxville Avenue is a very diagonal street compared to most of the street grid around it. So it creates a lot of wide intersections with crossings that are long and challenging. And even here, you could see there in the picture here, there's a picture at Anton Place where there's not even a crossing for one of these crossings, and it's sort of skewed. So there's also the lack of local bicycle connections connecting to Bronx Park. The neighborhood has all these greenways around it, but when you look at the bike map, there's really no bike lanes that connect to the park itself very directly. So, there's some recent bicycle lanes in the neighborhood, but the greenways don't connect to it. So for the proposed corridor changes, we are proposing to install 1 travel lane in each direction plus the left turn base to relieve the back pressure. And that would also include protected bicycle lanes and pedestrian islands at as many crossings as possible. This would shorten the pedestrian crossings by a significant amount, and it would ideally reduce the speeding along the corridor because we're tightening up the roadway. people drive a little slower, it seems less empty. And this would also be organizing the traffic by having separate bicycle paths, pedestrian islands, turn lanes. Doing all these changes would mean that we repurpose about 5 parking spots per block. When you think about the corner and the pedestrian islands, that ends up being about 5 spots per block. And that means about 60 spots total for the whole corridor. So in a similar example of this street is 9th Street in Brooklyn. So very similar design. In the images here, you could see the people crossing with their families. They get to the pedestrian island. They didn't make it all the way to the curb yet, but they're out of the street where there's moving vehicles and they might feel less safe. There's also the turn lanes here to reduce the back pressure. And then there's the green protected bike lanes behind the car, behind the parked car. This is, I don't know if I said the words yet, but this is like a protected, this is a parking protected bike lane, which would mean that bikes get to be in their own lane, cars get to be in their own lane. They don't have to mix with each other. And in general, it's narrowing the roadway to discourage the speeding. So this is a top-down view of a typical intersection. This is at Matthews, which as Bronxdale kind of cuts diagonal. This isn't a perfect 90 degrees, but it's a good example. So you could see some of the painted pedestrian islands here to shorten the crossing distance. You can get to the island and then cross and wait there. And then we have the turn lanes and the protected bicycle lanes. So this also would benefit the local bicycle network because it would connect directly to Bronx Park, and then you could connect all the greenways, which I know I've taken all the way to City Island. And then we also would connect to Castle Hill Avenue, which if you take that south, you can get all the way to the Soundview Ferry Terminal. So that could be for a fun trip just to take the bike to Ferry, or you could do it for a commute if you're heading further south. So those are for the whole corridor. Now we're going to go into the very specific intersections and some of the designs that we have there. So the first one is at Bronxdale, Rhinelander, and Mulliner Avenue. So this is an aerial picture and a street picture. Oh, you can't see my mouse. Okay. And the crossings here are very long. It's a very wide intersection. There's a pedestrian signal kind of almost in the middle of the street feeling, but if you cross here, it's the north crosswalk along Rhinelander is 140 feet and the south crosswalk along Bronxdale is 120 feet. And, you know, if you're an elderly person, if you've got your kids with you, you got your groceries, this is a long crossing to try to get across and hope that a car isn't coming the other way. And there's also a stop control for Mulliner Avenue. Meanwhile, Rhinelander is signalized, so people can cross here whenever they want, which is also a concern. If you're crossing here, you don't know when someone's going to go because there's no light to control this intersection. So for our solution, for our proposed condition, I shouldn't say solution, this is a illustrated view of the design. And so the first part is to add a very big pedestrian island here that we could put granite blocks in, we could put delineators around so that it feels like somewhere where you could actually stop and not have to cross the full 140 feet, 120 feet. So you could wait there near the pedestrian pole. And the other part is I should say we did. Okay, yeah. The other part is that, as I brought up, this was the Mulliner Avenue crossing is stop controlled, and as you can see in this, we're not actually able to close the slip lane. The main part of this is because this pedestrian signal is right where even a very small delivery truck would have to turn. It'd have to hit the signal, so we'd have to move the signal, which is more work than we're able to do right now. But what we do by making this island here is we're able to add this to the list of capital projects, which means that when the street gets capitally rebuilt when the street gets capitally rebuilt, we're able to raise this pedestrian space, but we're not able to just raise it. We'd be able to change a lot of things. We'd be able to move the poles. We'd be able to close the slip lane and make this so that it's a nicer corner than it is. But in the meantime, what we can do is add the island. We can tighten up all this geometry here to make it so that even if a car is coming through, there's a very tight space that has to come through. Make this crossing much nicer for someone walking and biking. So for the proposed intersection changes at Neal, Hunt, Anton, and Wallace along Bronxdale Avenue, it's a mouthful. And even though it's many intersections, we thought of this kind of as one big connected design because it's all so close to each other. Sorry about that. So there's a mix of stop controlled and signalized intersections and many slip lanes. There's poor visibility underneath the subway structure. And there's a bunch of pedestrian desire lines marked by these green arrows that people want to cross here, but there's no crossing. So there's this one along the south side, south or east side of Anton Place, depending on how you think of it. And then on the south side of Bronxdale, you can't actually just walk down Bronxdale. People end up walking in the middle of the street. So I'm going to go over our design piece by piece here because it's a lot of pieces. So the first part is at Anton Place and at kind of near Holland Avenue along Bronxdale, right in front of the medical pavilion. So the first part is to add a crosswalk so that someone can cross on both sides of Anton Place. The second part would be to remove this slip lane that has a stop sign, but in the existing condition, someone, even if they go into here, they have to turn right back onto Bronxdale Avenue. So we're proposing to close the slip lane. We'd still leave a little opening for if there need to be a delivery or some sort of emergency situation to get to the medical pavilion here. But in general, it'd be all pedestrian space and you'd be able to just cross here at Anton Place and then keep going down the street. Yes, so that's that for here. We're going to move across the street. So here along Bronxdale Avenue, there's a big slip lane right here that people cannot cross down. They can't, people can't cross the street down Bronxdale Avenue. You have to just kind of wait for a gap and jump across the slip lane here. A lot of people end up walking in the street right where this car is to get around the barrier. So we wanted to normalize the way that people walk down the street, where there's a lot of people that just walk in the middle of the street here. And by reducing Bronxdale to one lane in each direction, we have enough room, not just for pedestrian space, so we have enough room for a bike lane too. And this means that, and we also harden the turn. So we're not fully removing the turn, but someone, if they want to turn down Hunt, they have to make it closer to a 90-degree angle. And that means they have to yield a lot more and not just take a turn at full speed like a slip lane. And we also fit in a little bit extra parking under here on this island and add a lot more pedestrian space to make it walker friendly. So the last section is at Neal and Hunt on the northern side. There's another slip lane where there's a stop control that people can just cross while the signal's doing whatever it's doing. And on this one, unlike at Mulliner, we can close this fully and have people just make the turn at a 90-degree angle. So that also decreases the crossing distance from about 100 feet to about 30 feet because they're missing the whole slip lane. And we add turn lanes like along the whole corridor. And we remove the confusing stop controlled signal. So all in all, we're removing / editing we're removing all the slip lanes and changing one of them into a turn. And then we're also adding 2 new pedestrian crossings with this proposal. One thing that's not in the drawing here is to the south of here at Hunt and Holland, there's a big open space with a lot of buffer area that we could add some extra parking spots because in this whole rearrangement, some of the parking spots get repurposed. So that's somewhere where we could fit some more parking to kind of not take away all the parking around this intersection. So in summary, we're reducing speeding by narrowing the roadway and removing excess vehicular capacity. We're improving the lane organization with left turn lanes and bike lanes. We're shortening the crossing distance with painted pedestrian islands. We're installing family-friendly protected bike lanes to Bronx Park. And this proposal also simplifies the irregular intersections and improves the pedestrian access by installing new pedestrian spaces and new crossings. So with that, we'll open up to questions. Thanks for listening to me for 20 minutes. That was a bit of my voice is dry.
Good job, Zach.
Hello. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, this is Officer Medeiros of the 49th Precinct. How you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Good. I have a question, if you don't mind. I noticed that, I think maybe page 25 or 26 of the presentation, you had Bronxdale Avenue and Anton Place, the medical pavilion, I think you called it. One of the slip lanes that you're the first, yeah, that one. You said that you were going to leave an opening for vehicles to travel into the, well, at that point, what used to be the slip lane so that they can do their medical drop-offs or deliveries. My concern is that that slip lane is pretty commonly used for that particular location. I don't want to say heavily traveled, but it's definitely used for dropping people off and picking people up. Would there be any way to maybe put signage there to control the types of vehicles that can go onto that slip lane? Or maybe I'm not explaining myself correctly. Am I being confusing?
Oh, that makes sense. Someone else
So
can
the
answer.
plan really here is to keep this as pedestrianized as possible. That checkered area, that where the brick style is.
Oh, of course. But the problem is that once you open the possibility for vehicles to enter the bricked area, as it was proposed, you basically open the possibility for anyone to drive into the bricked area. That's why I'm asking whether or not there's going to be any signage or controls limiting the types of vehicles or the reasons why they would travel into that area. Because if not, then I can guarantee you that people are going to continue to drive in there.
We'll sign it appropriately.
Okay.
After Officer Medeiros asks his question,
And,
only
sorry,
the committee
Frano,
members
I just
have
wanted
to
to,
ask
I
questions.
wanted to sort of say one thing also, that we also plan on reaching out and speaking with the medical facility. We've actually already started that process. So we're going to work with them to make sure that we can come up with a design that meets their needs while at the same time not opening this up to any sort of abuse. But we'll definitely keep you in the loop about this because, you know, we are going to require your help with enforcement.
Okay, the questions are from the committee first. Officer Medeiros, do you have anything else? Otherwise, since you already asked your question. Okay, anybody from the committee before I ask anything?
I have a few questions. This is Lisa. Hold on, let me just pull up my notes. Regarding first of all, thank you. I think this was a really good presentation, and looks like you took a lot of things into consideration. I drive that area very frequently. It's near my house, so I definitely see the need for fixing the confusion on a lot of those intersections. My question regarding the bike lane, two questions specifically, actually 3 questions specifically regarding the bike lane. When you say protected, in some of the images you showed, some of the examples that you showed, I think they were from Manhattan, have some types of barriers. Are there going to be any barriers to actually protect the bike lanes, or is it just going to be painted pavement?
So the main barrier is going to be parked cars.
Right.
For the most of the corridor, but then we would
Mhm.
have these are called plastic delineators, the little white sticks.
Yep.
So there'd be that, and then for some of the really large pedestrian areas, we can put in granite blocks that I don't have a picture of actually, but those like really hardly anything can move those, and that's just another barrier to put up.
Okay. My second question on the bike lanes is I know in Manhattan, some of those bike lanes, the bikers tend to just fly through. They don't always necessarily respect the street lights, the traffic lights rather. And I've seen on some intersections in Manhattan where they actually have special designated lights for the bike lanes with a little picture of a bike, you know, the red, yellow and green, but like with an actual picture of a bike. Do you plan to install those anywhere? And if not, could you at least put, I don't know, some kind of signage or stop sign? Because they always make me nervous when they kind of just do what they want. And if this is a low traffic area, I suspect that the rules may not be followed. And I know that the police tend to not enforce that very often, usually because they don't see it or they're not around or they have other things to do.
So for this proposal, we're not changing a lot of the signals around it. So bikes are going to go forward right when cars do. So in that case, we don't add the green bicycle symbol. We do that when we do really complex things with like turn arrows and we want to hold bikes at certain times when like cars go at different times. So
Got it.
yeah.
Okay, and will there be any parking spots lost? I know you said that in some of the islands that you build, there will be some parking spots lost, but you're gonna try to replace them. But like, is there gonna be a loss? Parking is already a concern in this area. So do you see a large amount of parking spots being lost?
The total is approximately 60 spots. It ends up being about 5 spots per block, like one at each corner, and sometimes like there's a place where a driveway is really close that or the island is kind of large. I don't have a good slide up. Let me.
So you throughout the whole span of Barksdale Avenue, you say about 60 spots would be lost?
Yes.
Okay,
That is my concern. That
that's gonna be a huge problem.
there's too many spots being lost. 60 spots is quite a number.
Yeah, that is huge. Is there anything that you can do? I know you said that this is a draft, so I know that that's gonna be a big concern for our board and for the community at large. So is there a way that you can look to try to see where you can replace those spots?
Well, I think this is why, this is the first step. Traditionally, we kick off our outreach by going to the community board committee. And we're definitely going to sort of, we hope that you'll help us in spreading the word. We plan on, scheduling meetings with, there are many different stakeholders along Bronxdale Avenue. We're going to want to meet with them to sort of show them the plan, hear their concerns, and see what we can do, in addition to the medical center. We have several big establishments, the F&J Pine, Maestros, Charter School, the Morris Park Community Association has office meeting area also on Bronxdale. So there's a lot here, a lot of individuals and stakeholders who are going to want to meet and see what we can do. These projects, to be fair, this design will entail a lot of parking loss. I don't want to shy away from that. We can definitely try and work to see where we could find offsets to hopefully maybe bring the net loss down, but there will be an impact. We think that unfortunately, it's hard. When wanting to design a roadway to be safer for everyone, there have to be trade-offs because unfortunately there's not unlimited space. And these trade-offs, these benefits, these safety benefits to pedestrians and cyclists, and also to motorists, because speeding tends to be a danger to motorists as well, not just the pedestrians and the cyclists. we believe these benefits will outweigh the loss, but we are going to want to speak to everybody before we do everything to let everyone know, to consult as many voices as possible, and to get as much feedback as possible.
Okay, Daisy, go ahead, please.
Would the same number of spots be lost if there were no bike lane implementation?
You're saying that if we, well, that would be a completely different design. If we were to take out the bike lane and do something different, it would be a very different design. So we'd have to get back to you on that, whether that, I mean, it probably would be less, but we're talking now, if we sort of take out the bike lane, a completely different design, because the loss isn't really coming from the bike lanes. The loss is really coming, if you look at the screen here, where we're adding the islands, those islands are where the loss of parking are going to take place. So it's not necessarily the bike lane, because on most of the block, the parked cars are going to serve as the buffer between cyclists and vehicles traveling in the travel lane. But at the intersections where we have these islands, these pedestrian spaces, that daylighting where we narrow the intersection, that's where you're going to see the parking loss.
But there was a statement made that in 1 or 2 spots, they could be converted into parking spots. If I misunderstood, please correct me.
Yeah, Zach, do you want to go back to that point of those locations?
Yeah, so that's some of the offsetting we've already tried to do in this design. So we're still end up at the net 60. That's what that. Oh, which way am I going? Okay, so part of it was
It sounded contrary to that. It sounded like we could pick up some parking spots. So I guess you misspoke.
Yeah, maybe I sound a little more hopeful than I should have, but one of the locations I have okay, yeah, so there's this location here where we could fit in a few more spots, but it's like maybe 6 spots, 8 spots. So
Well, 8 is better than nothing.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yes.
8 is definitely better than nothing, because the problem with this area, again, because I live here, you know, there are other parts of the Bronx and in the city in general where, like, if you can't find a parking, then it's like, okay, I give up. I'll just put my car in a parking lot and deal with the fee. But there's not even that option around here. You know, if you come home late at night, you can literally drive around for hours and not find a parking spot. So yeah, any spots that you can give as part of this plan, the more, the better. Like, anything would be appreciated. And Frano, if nobody else on the committee has questions, I actually have 2 more. Sorry, I had I was taking a lot of notes.
I got one more question, Lisa. I'm sorry
ahead,
if I
Daisy.
missed this. I'm sorry if I missed this, but these plans affect any of the bus routes? You might have mentioned it and I didn't catch that.
No bus routes are being changed. And it's important, like, you know, generally, the MTA did have, unrelated to this, back in 2019, they had proposed a Bronx-wide redesign. That was sort of the forum where bus routes were going to be changed and stops are going to be changed. This plan really doesn't, this plan would work with the current bus configuration and any future planned bus configuration. But as a result of this, we are not proposing, or we have not asked the MTA to reroute buses or remove stops.
So I'll go ahead and ask my other 2 questions. One, on
Yes.
on the islands, are there plans to add greenery to those islands, or are they just going to be concrete slabs?
Well, right now, we're not proposing building anything in concrete, because the concrete addition will require, as Zach said, relocation of utilities and signal poles. So what
I
we're
must have missed
proposing
that,
is
okay.
doing this in truffle paint. In the future, if we were to capitally reconstruct this roadway, we could build this out in concrete, and at that time, we could work in some sort of greenery landscaping. However, it's going to be, we would need a maintenance partner, because whenever we install greenery or landscaping on our projects, we need to have someone that can maintain it, or else it's going to have like overgrown
Right.
shrubbery or, you know, trash that's not going to get picked up. So whenever you add greenery, there has to be something in place, either from a third party or the city, you know, supplementing the ability to maintain the spaces. So that's hard
So
to
there's
do, because so right now we're not adding any green spaces. It's unclear when we would be able to sort of build this out in concrete, but if that were to happen, we would have plenty of time to discuss with the community board and the local community what could be done to green and beautify the spaces.
And then,
And then
my
I-
last
and then-
question- oh, sorry. go
And
ahead.
just sorry, Lisa, just to finish. But ideally, whenever we do install green space, we would love to have a community partner or a third party that would handle maintenance and upkeep.
Got it.
Oh,
Okay,
an
so
extra
my last
thing.
question, on this particular slide, I'm glad you have it up. I think this is slide 26, right? I wrote down slide
27.
26. Okay, so on slide 20, well, you could see it here too, actually. Oh yeah, 27. On Neal Avenue, if I'm not mistaken, isn't that 2 lanes that are coming onto Bronxdale Avenue? And are you combining those 2 lanes into one, or was that always, I don't remember. I know it used to, right now it winds up being 2 lanes, but I can't tell from the way this drawing is if that was 2 lanes, if you're turning 2 lanes into one. It looks wide and then it gets narrow.
It is sort of changing. At the very end, it turns into 2 lanes with the stop sign there. So yes, we are combining it, but we did do traffic analysis here, and it all seemed to fit into 1 lane. So
Okay, so there'll be
yeah.
like appropriate signage to let drivers know that it's merging from 2 lanes into one.
Oh, you mean farther back? Yes. We could put the proper.
Right,
signage.
yeah, because you see how right now it splits, right? There's 2 lanes and it splits to go to the right or straight. But in your new drawing, you look like you're kind of pushing both of those lanes together into 1 lane where people will either turn right or left.
Yes. Yeah, we would put the proper signage out.
Okay. I mean, is there a reason that you have to do that? Can you just leave 2 lanes close together with 1 right and 1 left instead of splitting it the way it is currently?
I'm looking.
Hold on.
I'm actually checking in.
So
with the aerial right now.
Yeah, the reason we're looking to sort of condense this into 1 lane is there's a primarily pedestrian benefit here. Like, you know, folks
Okay.
crossing here have to cross really like 2 different travel lanes that are going southbound, and then the travel lane going northbound. We think that having 2 lanes like that close together is a little bit redundant. Consider, you know, if the traffic volume was very high to warrant keeping both those lanes, it would be hard for us to remove. But the traffic that goes through this area is not in the amount where these 2 lanes are needed. It could process with a stop control with only 1 lane. And that allows us to sort of increase the pedestrian space, as you can see, which ends having the benefit of shortening the crossing distance for pedestrians crossing here. So this is like one of the benefits that we try to
Right.
do whenever having these plans is like where, you know, because it's hard to add signal timing. Like ideally, you know, folks would just say, oh, just add more signal timing to the pedestrians, the walk signal, but that comes at a cost. What time that you add in one direction comes at the expense of another direction. So one of the ways that we can, you know, basically give time to pedestrians without giving time is by shortening the distance. So instead
Right.
of going 60 feet, if you go 30 feet, then the time we give you is more than enough for folks to cross safely.
So so I hear you, that makes sense. So rather than blocking that whole piece out as pedestrian space, can you convert some of that into parking space? Like if you're combining 2 lanes into 1 anyway, why not make it 1 lane a little bit earlier and use that extra space as parking that you're gonna lose in other places?
I mean, that's something that we can take a look at. I mean, it's not particularly easy, but we can try to see where, you know, it's possible to add a space or 2, but it would be tough. I want to point out, however, that Neal Avenue if you, past here, Neil Avenue between Bronxdale and really all the way to, at least all the way to Williamsbridge is one lane in both directions. It's not a two, it's not a 4-lane road. It's one way. So what happens is that at this location at Neil and Bronxdale, the roadway actually fans out. It widens out to provide those 2 lanes that you see. So we're actually keeping everything as 1 lane all the way through. So instead of widening at the mouth, when it gets to Bronxdale, it's going to remain 1 lane.
Right. No, I hear you. I'm just saying, instead of getting rid of that widening out part, why not make that widening out part a few parking spots instead?
Well, that's something we could take a look at. It's, it's a little bit complicated because we have to, at the bare minimum, we have to preserve the space where the crosswalk is right now. So if you were to sort of look at the intersection now, you have a crosswalk, you have a channelized triangle that splits both roadways, another crosswalk, and then the sidewalk.
Even if you can get two or 3 spots, as we said before, we'll appreciate that.
Right. So yeah, we'll take a second look. I mean, I'm not promising anything because these are complicated geometries, but we can definitely take a look and report back to the community board when we meet again.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry that I'm monopolizing time. I let everybody else talk now.
Okay, Debbie, you have any questions before I ask 1 or 2 more questions?
Yeah, I was wondering if, like, along the area, along Bronxdale, where you're gonna have like the car protected bike lane, if they can sort of mark each of the parking spots, because some people just don't even know how to park, and they're parking so far, they're like social distancing their vehicles from others. So instead of what you could fit 10 cars, the way some people, you might end up only fitting 7 cars. So if they can mark the spots like they do in Manhattan and Westchester, that would be great.
Well, we generally don't mark spaces anywhere in the city. I mean, usually if a space gets marked, it's usually separate a parking lane from, let's say, a driveway, or a parking lane from a bus stop. And the reason we don't is because when you mark out spaces, you have to create a space wide enough for the largest vehicle on the road. So that ends up actually reducing the amount of spaces that you could have on a given block face. Because now if we're marking out space, we consider a parking space to be 20 feet. Most cars aren't 20 feet, but if we mark out at 20 feet for every parking space on a block, let alone the maintenance burden that it adds to the agency, it actually ends up reducing the parking capacity in a block. I mean, I definitely understand that many times people don't block properly, but I tend to find in most neighborhoods where parking is a premium, people will tighten up. But if you end up, marking out the spaces, what ends up happening is there's a lot of wasted space, because we're going to mark it out at 20 feet in order to capture like a very large vehicle, like, let's say a Chevy Suburban, for example. But then you have a lot of sort of like mid-sized and compact sized vehicles that won't need that space, but because it's marked out, no one else is going to be able to park there. So it comes with a trade-off. Like you have, yes, these set spots where everyone knows where there should be, but that comes at a cost at reducing the parking capacity of any block face. So that's why we don't do that.
Understood. Thank you.
Does that make sense? I mean, when you see this in other locations, you'll see that the spaces are spaced out very, very widely. And it's to take into account that you don't want a situation where a vehicle goes to pull into these spots and is too long for the spot. So you have to sort of overcompensate and mark out a parking space that is wider than most vehicles to accommodate the very few that are very large.
I understand what you're saying. It's just that I know where I live, on my end, sometimes, like when I'm circling around for a spot, I wish I had a forklift just to move a couple of vehicles, because you could probably get another 4 cars in if people parked normally.
Yeah. It also depends on the time of day. I mean, that happens in my neighborhood and all the neighborhoods I've lived in. There are people who sort of feel the need not to, maximize the space. But that changes throughout the day. Sometimes the days everyone's parked in tightly, and sometimes the days it's not. So that's a very But I definitely, I wish I had a better answer, and I wish there was a solution for that. You know, if we had sort of a roving parking lift that would move cars to sort of provide that extra space, that would be great. But painting lines will actually formalize the problem that you see. It would basically make it that every time all the spots are taken up, there would be this excess space that would be unable to be used.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner, when do you see this project that's starting, and have you reached out to the different community such as Morris Park and Van Nest yet?
So like I said, we start outreach by first going to you. And then now that we've shown this to the community board, we are going to conduct outreach to all the groups. We're going to, you know, send you a list of who we plan to reach out to. And if you think there's anyone missing, anyone else we should reach out to, please let us know and provide our any contact information. But, you know, just like for all major projects, our first port of call is always the community board to let you know, to sort of help us to spread the word throughout the neighborhoods affected.
Okay, thank you. Anybody
But
else?
our plan, ideally, our plan would be to implement later this year, but we want to use the spring and, you know, definitely the early summer to conduct outreach, meet with you again, meet with the stakeholders. Like I said, we have a lot of stakeholders along Bronxdale. I mentioned a bunch of them earlier, but that is not by no means the extent of the stakeholders on this corridor.
Thank you. Anybody else from the committee before I open to the gallery?
I just wanted to say something, Frano. Commissioner, have you spoken with ComEd, because they're doing major work on Bronxdale Avenue? And based on what we have gotten so far, I don't think they're going to finish within 1 year.
So we are. Sorry, I had a bit of a technical difficulty. We are aware. Con Ed is a, you know, it's funny. Con Ed years ago came to us, with, you know, a bunch of suggestions for safety improvements on Bronxdale. 4-to-3 conversion was one of them. We're going to engage with them more fully about this new proposal. But yes, their work does impact and influence our schedule. So we're going to be in conversations with them to understand what's their timeline, where are they going to be working, when are they going to be finished, so we can implement.
I actually just thought of not a question, but just a suggestion in terms of finding more parking. In front of New York Sports Club, for some reason, and I heard through the grapevine that this is like an old leftover sign from when New York Sports Club was something else. The whole sidewalk in front of New York Sports Club is a non-parking, non-standing, one of those red signs that basically you can't do anything in front of. And I'm not quite sure why, because I don't know why. So if you could look into that, that would open up several spots on that one strip.
This is where is this between Van Nest and Pierce?
I can't say. Possibly. I don't know the exact cross streets. It sounds about right, but I can't say for sure.
Yes, it's between Van Nest and Pierce.
So we could definitely take a look at the parking regulations to see why it would say no parking.
Okay.
And that is near the charter school, though, correct?
I think there's a charter school like across the street, but this is the parking directly in front of New York Sports Club.
Okay. Oh, is the New York Sports Club on the same side? The New York Sports Club is on the same side as the Con Ed facility.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I do see there is a no parking regulation from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Sunday. So we will investigate that and see if that needs to be updated to regular alternate side parking.
Yeah, because that would open up quite a few spots.
Okay, anybody else from the committee? Okay. Anybody from the gallery has any questions?
I have another question.
Go ahead, please.
Is this the first part of your presentation, or are there gonna be further meetings with the second, maybe other parts of the presentation? Because I noticed that a very large strip of I guess this project is kind of missing in the presentation, like the area of Morris Park and Bronxdale, or even Van Nest and Bronxdale.
Well, at those locations, so the reason we didn't show every single intersection is the intersections we've shown are going to be standard throughout. We focused on the intersections that are going to be a bit different from the standard design. So Zach, you want to go back? I think it was the intersection of Bronxdale and Matt, this is a good example. So there's other intersections, Bronxdale and Morris Park. Other locations that we didn't show are going to follow this design. So
Okay.
for the purposes of brevity and efficiency, we wanted to focus on this is like sort of our standard design, and only show the intersections where we're deviating from this design. But if there's
Gotcha.
an intersection that's not shown on this presentation, it's because it's going to look like Bronxdale and Matthews.
Gotcha.
It's something that we can meet with you and sort of go over a more detailed. We do have the drawing for the whole corridor, so if that would help you to go over that, we can definitely schedule that meeting.
No, that's fine. The reason why I'm asking is, in particular, the area of Van Nest Avenue and Bronxdale Avenue. That's the location of the Van Nest Academy. My concern that is, if that particular area fits the diagram that's currently on screen, then we might have trouble once school gets back to normal and goes back into session. We have major double parking problems in that area, and I've been dealing with it in collaboration with the school principal and with our different traffic units for a long time, and we still have very big double parking troubles there. And looking at the proposal, it looks like there will be little to no room for any type of double parking in the area. Not that double parking is legal anyway, but the problem is that the parents and the guardians picking up children of the school, they're going to double park anyway. And if that means they're going to be in the traffic lane, then that's where they're going to be every day, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. And that's probably going to cause a traffic problem going both north and south on Bronxdale Avenue at that location. Another issue, I don't know if this issue has changed or not, but the last time I checked, the Van Nest School has a few students of special needs where their school bus has to be positioned about as close to the curb as possible so they can effectively pick up the students. And a lot of times the school bus can't do that because of all the parking issues and space. But I guess that's a separate issue from this. I guess my concern really would be, would there be room for any type of editing of the design just for that particular location, just to make sure that the students are safe when going into the street? Because it looks like from that design, they're going to have to go into the street to go into the buses by crossing the bike lanes. And if there's any type of plan to maybe mitigate the level of double parking that's going to occur, and probably flat out traffic lane blocking that's going to occur once school fully comes into session.
So, the main tool there we have is curb management and rethinking the regulations that exist there. But this is something that we're going to want to discuss with the school, and it probably going to make a lot of sense to have the 4-9 involved when we speak to the school, because enforcement is going to be an important piece of this. So, they are definitely, I mentioned them earlier in the presentation, but they are definitely one of the key stakeholders we have to speak to before finalizing this plan and implementation.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I think it's important that, when we present these designs, we are not looking to encourage or facilitate any illegal behavior. We understand that it happens, And, oftentimes double parking is a result of curb regulations that don't match the need. So we have to rethink that and figure out what could be done to get folks at the curb for these pickups. But, we're not going to design something and sort of let folks say, oh, well, double parking's okay. It's not kind of what we've done in other locations.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
there's a D75 school, so those are handicapped students.
Yeah, we're going to speak to all the schools in that building. So I believe there's several schools in that building. So we're going to want to talk to, all the principals and really understand their needs and what we can do to accommodate them.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Look
We have our
forward
hands
to
raised.
further-
Oh, Fran, I think there are people in the chat that have raised their hands.
Okay, well, I asked and he didn't ask. I said for the gallery, but go ahead, Kevin.
I'm very cordial to you, Franco. First thing I want to say is thank you, Franco, Daisy, for having the DOT here tonight, because in last month's meeting, I kind of asked and brought up it being a good idea to have the DOT make a representation of the 218 Bronxdale safety proposal, being as it looked like Con Ed was halfway through or so of their work on Bronxdale Avenue. And rather than having repainted and then having it repainted for this proposal at a later date, that, everybody gets on the same page to kind of maybe, work on this at the same time. So I'm glad that this meeting tonight is happening. I did come in just a few minutes late, but everything I heard from Zach sounded great. No real changes from what I have seen in the past. And I don't really have any questions except a real simple one. But when you mentioned the Bronxdale White Plains Road protected bike lane that's currently there, that opened up a few months back, it just goes from like Bronxdale Avenue to the park. It's a big elbow. Would there be any funds or resources available in this Bronxdale package to move the lamppost that's in the middle of the bike lane on the sidewalk at the end of that protected bike lane? And I'd be happy to discuss that with you at a later date if you're not familiar with that lamppost at all. But other than that, I appreciate you guys coming out today and getting ahead of the whole proposal and getting ahead of the Con Ed when they complete their work. So thanks DOT and thanks CB11 for making it happen. I don't have any other questions.
Thanks, Kevin. To your question about the light post, that's actually one of the punch list items from the White Plains Road, Bronxdale, Unionport, Bronx Park East project. So we plan on getting back to that this year.
Anybody else from the gallery?
Yes. So, if I may,
Go ahead. Yes.
I'm so happy to see this proposal. I was just expecting a boring 4-to-3 road diet, so I'm really thrilled with this proposal. This is the kind of ambition we need, and this is a proposal I'm really going to fight for. So please do not water it down. This is great stuff. So I did have one question. On some of the slides, like on slide 26, you had this red thing. Is that a barrier or what is that? Yeah, what is that?
Yeah.
Red line.
So when I gave the answer for barriers, I left out this actually. This is quick curb, which is it's kind of a bigger plastic structure that sticks out of the road. And just in this area right here is kind of just too narrow to put parking, but then we also didn't want people just leaving their cars there because then it would leave it too tight for everyone. So that's why that's there. This is still
Those
kind
the,
of like the
the
AutoCAD drawing.
thick bollards, the thick plastic ones? Like
Yes,
on
and
the
they're all
side of the road?
connected on the bottom. They're not just individual posts. It's like yeah.
Yeah, the thing is about those
Cool.
is that they tend to get destroyed by snow plows and things like that. That's why activists tend to argue for more, concrete instead of the plastic bollards.
I think here we're going to have, this is why we just tried to design our bike paths and the space wide enough for sanitation to come through and not hit them. We're also going to talk to sanitation, of course, but we do have the maintenance capacity to, when one gets hit, to go back out and repair it right away.
And also regarding the school, I know you had the example of Skillman where you had a school, but do you use bus boarding platforms at schools like those that are on Southern Boulevard?
So those are often used where, we're putting a bike lane in front of an MTA bus.
Mhm.
And the reason there is, the MTA bus runs a lot more frequently than a school bus. School buses tend to run at very specific times infrequently throughout the year, whereas an MTA bus is going to run pretty regularly, some cases 24/7, other cases, 14, 15 hours a day. So right now we're just using those bus boarding platforms in locations where we're not able to extend the sidewalk and where it's for a New York City Transit MTA bus.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Zach, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but have we used that bus boarding platform in front of schools and other locations?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, that treatment is mostly used on two-way paths as well, where there's an actual head-on conflict with a cyclist headed south or, against the travel lane. Here, the travel lane and the bicycles are both moving in the same direction. So buses are able to pull, into the parking lane.
Okay. Anybody else? Any more questions? Okay, thank you for the presentation. I was going to ask for a follow-up, Commissioner, but I know that probably no study was done on the bike lane use on Allerton Avenue, right?
Well, we didn't really do anything during the pandemic. All traffic studies were on hold throughout the city. So now that we're restarting traffic studies, we have not forgotten about your request, and we can hopefully start that later this year. But when you had made that request last year, we were still on hold for all traffic studies throughout the city. So that hasn't started yet, but it's still in our queue. We haven't forgotten. We will provide you, a correspondence to you and the community board.
I appreciate it. And again, thank you for all your cooperation and to come in before our committee. And it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure on my end too, Frano. Thank you very much.
Okay, good night all. Well, except for my committee, you're welcome to stay. But committee, we have more business.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Chris,
Good night.
good night. Chris, could you put back
Good
the
luck,
agenda?
Frano.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Oh, and before I get off, Lisa, I know the last time we spoke back in November, you had a question about some hummocks. I think it was on Leidig. I haven't forgotten about those, so I still owe you a response on that.
Yes, I was going to ask you, but I feel like I pummeled you with enough questions tonight. So
That's okay. Well, you could also email me directly if you have other questions you want to ask, but I have not forgotten that, and I can definitely.
Okay, yeah, because definitely still,
Okay.
it has not changed. I drove down it the other day.
All right, perfect. Well, I'll follow up with you later this month.
All right, thank you.
All right, sure. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. Okay, Chris, could you put back the agenda? Okay. Item number 3, the co-naming. We said we were going to discuss it. We were given a couple of, I guess, one from the city itself and also the current do we have any comments or suggestions? I did send a suggestion earlier today. Because there was one of the items that the city itself says that even if you're not a community member, if you've done things for, I guess, like Mother Teresa or this Dr. Ibrahim and others, let's say Martin Luther King, people like that, we could always recommend naming streets for people that have contributed to the community at large. And I figure I'll start the conversation. Doesn't mean that we have to decide tonight. You guys could continue once a new chair is in place.
Do we know, this is Lisa, do we know what the and I apologize, I didn't get to look at these side by side, our rules versus the city rules, but do we know like what the differences are? Are there any major differences?
Yeah, the city does allow for people that have not lived in the community or had no impact in the community to have their name, I guess, to have them recommended to have their name on the street sign.
Right, so is that the only difference?
Well, that was a major difference that we
That was a
don't,
major difference?
yes.
Are we even allowed to go against what the city allows? Like, I'm sure we can add our own requirements, but I don't think we're allowed to, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I would think that we're not allowed to change what the city, if the city allows something, I don't know that we can unilaterally say, well, not in our neighborhood.
No, I think what it is each community decides its own. So if we add it, it doesn't mean we're going against the city. Actually, we improving the request.
Right, but I'm saying if the city is saying that we can name streets after people who are not in the community, are we allowed to then say, but we say no, we don't want to name, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, are we even allowed to do that?
Well, I think it's my understanding it's up to us to determine what our requirements are. So yes, I guess.
I mean, we should find that out for sure before we dive too deeply into this. I mean,
Tom.
yeah, because I mean, honestly, I'm just curious as to why our rules would be any different than the cities. Like, is there a reason that we want to differentiate? Like, that's where we should start. Like, what is the goal? Why do we want to change from what the city already has? I think what we should probably do is have, one or two people from the committee, like, do a deep dive on this offline, and then come back to the next meeting and kind of outline the differences for everybody, and then we can discuss it from there.
Okay, good enough for me. So I just wanted to make sure that I did it. I brought it up because we promised that we would bring it up, and by all means, with a new chair and probably a new addition as well to the committee, it makes sense that this gets discussed further.
Yeah.
We don't want the board to think that the transportation committee is not really thinking about it and it's going to continue naming names without changing you saw it, well, you heard and you saw also on the last board meeting how big they were on we have to add it, we have to put it on the agenda, things like that. So that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm happy to take the responsibility on this, because I think this is something that we can't necessarily, it requires a lot of reading and like going, it's not something that we can really analyze in a meeting like this. I think someone needs to do the work ahead of time and kind of present what the differences are. So then as a committee, we can decide yay or nay on which changes, if any, we want to implement or keep.
Excellent. So if questions are asked, we will state that this merits further discussion and questioning.
Yeah, that we're gonna analyze both the city, we're gonna analyze both the city requirements and our requirements and see what, and make a proposal in terms of what we want to, if we wanna make any changes and what we wanna keep.
Okay. Anybody else has anything to add or any questions in what we're discussing?
Not on that current topic.
Okay, good. Daisy, please mark Rabbi and Christian out. As far as I'm concerned, they are not excused absences until we hear otherwise.
We met with today.
Thank you. Okay. I'm opening this up to the gallery. Any questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Okay. Old business?
I guess it would sort of be under old business, Stillwell and Astor Avenue, where they did all the repaving. They had put a yellow line, but I think they use washable paint because the yellow line is totally gone.
Yeah, and also don't forget that those speed bumps are not there. So I got the feeling it's because until spring, nothing permanent was put. So I would make an allowance for a couple more months. And once those bumps are put, if there's no permanent yellow lines, I would bring it up. But by all means, you could write the commissioner directly.
Yeah, I plan on it. I was hoping he was gonna stay around for this.
Debbie, I'm sorry, what did you say? What is the cross
Stillwell?
street?
It's Stillwell from the Hutch to
Pelham
the
Parkway.
to Pelham Parkway Service Road, and Astor from Stillwell to, I think it's Morgan.
Chester.
No, it's even past that. It went to like Morgan. It went past the firehouse.
Oh, okay.
Where they did the repaving. The the double yellow line needs to be put back. They had put like, I guess, a temporary yellow line, but I think they use washable paint.
So Stillwell Avenue from the Hutch to Pelham Parkway, and Astor Avenue from where?
Stillwell, because it branches from Stillwell and goes to Morgan is where they did the repaving.
Morgan Avenue or street?
Morgan Avenue.
Okay, so Debbie, I'm assigning this to you. Why don't you send an email to the commissioner?
Okay, I will.
Thank you. Anything else?
New business?
Go ahead.
Okay, on Eli, between, what is it, between Waring and Gun Hill Road over by the old Pelham Bay Diner? That's a one-way going towards Gun Hill Road. But when you got patrons that are coming from that motel, they come out of there and they make a left turn, which is basically playing chicken on Eli. So if you're coming down Waring and you're going to make the left turn on Eli so you can catch the I-95, you're going to have a car coming straight at you because there's no sign saying that all traffic needs to go to the right.
Okay, so another assignment for you. When you do that email to the commissioner, could you also put this down?
I will certainly do that.
Okay. So that's technically new business.
Right.
Any other new business? Okay, I just want to say a couple of words to everybody. I want to thank you all. You've been a great group, and I really appreciated all your help, assistance, and I look forward to hearing great things from the committee, and God bless. Meeting is adjourned at 8:24.
I second that.
Thanks, Fernando, for everything.
Hey, Frano.